Hey, what's up? Well, what do you know? I'm getting a rare opportunity to make another video, and I could title it Christmas in July. This says Merry Christmas. Got it for hardly nothing. And I wish I could be unboxing my TEMU order. I really wish I could. But unfortunately, Customs decided to hold it up to the point where I will not be getting it until at least July the 25th. And if I'm lucky, it'll come in by August, At this point, I'll settle for it just coming in by August. Sad as that is, I ordered it right after the 4th of July because there were some patriotic items on clearance. Nobody really wants that patriotic stuff after the 4th of July. There's a lot of special stuff because of the 250-year anniversary. This country is now 250 years old. So I'm wearing some purple jewelry like Mardi Gras. Let's get to it. What I want to title it is Tropical Storm Bertha, like Big Bertha. Gives me deja vu to Beryl a couple years ago. The Beast Storm with a male A name. It's the other way around in an odd year. And it's just another reminder of why I hate living on the Gulf Coast. Really hate it. Really would much rather have moved up north. Couple, 4 years ago now? Just wow. And so while I don't have my TEMU stuff, I do have a new harmonica to play the train sound. Cute little cheap harmonica. So that's about all I can really show off. Perhaps I'll get my package in, by August. And perhaps when I'm home, I'll unbox it or I'll show what I got in it. So I just hope that goes down pretty well. And I just want to talk about, just Tropical Storm Bertha. Just think Big Bertha. It's not supposed to be a hurricane, not forecast to be a hurricane, but they say it could affect anyone from like Louisiana to Texas throughout the rest of the week. Basically, it's going to affect the entire Gulf Coast. And it's going to keep reminding me of why, we should have moved up north. We should have moved up north. And, all these round trips up and down the Gulf Coast just have not been a good life for me. I'm not happy that basically everything I've ever experienced in life has pretty much been along the Gulf Coast plain, plus a little bit of the hill country, a little bit out of the Gulf Coast plain, but never up in the mountains, never way up north, the Northeast, never on the Pacific West, never in the desert Southwest, with only man-made borders between the U.S. and Mexico. They're probably causing all these holdups with customs. So, would like to be talking about something more pleasant like TEMU and what I ordered. Instead I'm just talking about the Gulf Coast and how, that has a lot to do with why schools start ridiculously early and increasingly so. I don't think ever in my lifetime they began in September, but supposedly my mom remembers a time when they did, like it was after Labor Day before they started. And I can remember it backing up further and further and further, throughout my years in Texas, to the point where it went from late August, my kindergarten year, gradually toward earlier August, mid-August probably, well, by my middle school years. I definitely remember that this is the 30-year anniversary coming up on, August the 16th? Oh my goodness. August the 16th will be 30 years that I've known that unforgettable teacher. And yeah, it's a long story. My 7th grade year, it was probably, as I've stated before, it was the least normal. It was the least normal of all my school years as far as, not belonging with any other group. You know what I'm saying? Because 8th grade clearly felt like it belonged with high school, even though I was physically still in middle school or junior high. 6th grade still felt like it belonged with elementary school, even though I'd physically gone into junior high. It felt like I was still elementary me, despite having a period already when I was in the 6th grade and below. And then when I was in 8th grade and above, It felt like I was high school me already. Like, these turning points happened in the seventh grade, and specifically the spring semester of seventh grade. You know what I'm saying? Seventh grade started out, like every year pretty much started out with me trying to desperately hang on for dear life to the previous stage. That's why I do not understand this, kids wanting to push themselves ahead and think of themselves in the next higher age group. You know what I'm saying? Putting books at a fourth grade level that are about middle school, and middle school level about high school, and a high school level about adults. I really don't understand that. Why kids are supposed to want to read about the next stage in development. You know what I'm saying? The next higher age group. Why would they want to do that? I do not know. I mean, life is short enough, and childhood is even shorter. Why would you want to fast forward through it? So, it started out, seventh grade started out me clinging on for dear life to the previous, stage of development, which obviously would be sixth grade. So, as embarrassing as it is to look back on, to reflect on seventh grade as an adult, what's hard is to remember it in the context of it being only the next year after sixth grade and nothing more. And, 2 years after an elementary grade, fifth, and 3 years after probably the worst elementary grade, fourth, when we started dressing out for PE, and we had to learn about puberty and all that. And, fourth grade was probably the worst year of school, bar none. Um, you know, and so it's hard to see my seventh grade year in that context of, instead of it was just 30 years ago and that feels like yesterday, no, it was just 1 year after the sixth grade. Wherein most, if not all, classmates on the first day of school were under 13. And, because it felt so much closer to eighth grade by the end of the year, wherein pretty much all classmates were over 13 and in their teens. So that made it feel like high school. So, yeah, it's like middle school, we had gotten to the point of starting in mid-August, like around the 15th. And then in high school, it just became so ridiculous. I'll never forget, my 10th grade year, beginning, what was it? Like Tuesday, August 10th of 1999. See, it's amazing how I still remember these dates. And Friday the 13th has a lot to do with that. I'm much more likely to remember a month that either has a Friday the 13th or was close to one that did, like we're about to have a Friday the 13th in the following month, or we just had one in the previous month. The closer you are to Friday the 13th, the more memorable that time in my life is. You know what I'm saying? Because Friday the 13th and colds and trains and things like that just make an impression on me, like other people, they don't. So I was so angry, Tuesday, August 10th, 1999, they had to begin my sophomore year. And the reason that made me especially angry, unlike the previous and following years, which probably began similarly early, was because Tuesday, the 10th, made the fourth day of school Friday the 13th. Big, bad, unlucky Friday the 13th. And I can remember being so angry because it's like, instead of just giving us those 4 days off, and beginning our school on a much, I guess, luckier note, Monday the 16th, I would have gladly given up 4 school holidays. You know what I'm saying? I would have much preferred, had we not gotten a full week off for, say, Thanksgiving, for instance, and maybe lost a couple other holidays, or, continued school a little later in May, almost to June. I would have much preferred to give up 4 holidays than to begin so early in the year that we just had to have that Friday the 13th, right at the beginning of my sophomore year, which got the year off to kind of a bad start, Whereas 30 years prior, or no, 28 years, because the dates cycle perfectly every 28 years. So if this was like 99, couldn't help but think of how, like, 71 would have had that same pattern, because 2000 was not a leap year. Unlike 1900 was not a leap year, 2000 was a leap year. So because 2000 was a leap year, it cycles that way. So I guess 1971 also had like a Friday, August the 13th, but guess what? Because they began school later, it was probably still summer, just like if it would have been in June or July, the Friday the 13th. Because some school years you don't have a Friday the 13th. You know, like my senior year, because the last one had been in July, and you go a rare 14 months without one. You know, September, I would already be in college by that point. So my senior year and my first grade year did not have Friday the 13th, thanks to it happening in July and not being a leap year. But even if it would have been a leap year, the next one would be in June. So, you know, you'd still go without a Friday the 13th if you have one in July. Because it's like you have one April, July, and then the rest of the year you're off with Friday the 13th. So, yeah, just nerdy facts that I don't really need to know, but I just happen to know. But, you know, that's what I say. I mean, the things that I've learned that have meant the most to me in life were not things I was officially taught in school. You know what I'm saying? Like the phases of the moon, the Friday the 13th, and, you know, other math facts. I really do think that even if I'd never been to school, I could have learned the things that really matter to me. So long as I lived in a world where those facts were available in some way. So yeah, I got a new anchor blouse. And hopefully this TEMU package that's taking forever, you know, will have these patriotic items, and I will get it soon. So yep, I hope we don't get hit too hard by Tropical Storm Bertha, and I'll go ahead and post this video. Merry Christmas in July.